welcome to the November Academic Achievement Committee meeting. I'm glad everybody's here today. So I hope everybody's nervous. It'll be a nice evening. So anyway, breathing. Okay, good. It'll be a nice set of discussions. Public comment. I have Louise. If you'd like to come forward. Are there any other members of the public here at all?
I'm coming as a member of the public right now, so that's the identification. All right, because I'm coming twice, but this is a member of the public.
Okay, all right. So then, as a member of the public, please identify yourself and proceed.
I'm Louise Wilson. I'm a teacher at Innovation Central, and a couple of teachers have asked me to make sure that you're aware of a couple of items, just because they don't believe that you possibly can be. The first thing is that the attendance policy is that we understand that when you're an elementary school student, if you're 30 minutes late, that tardy is good. But that means that our kids are being marked tardy when they miss more than half a class. We have classes that are 55 minutes long, and we are marking people tardy if they are up to 30 minutes late. Innovation Central is about a 7-minute walk from McDonald's. So you can get to McDonald's, be back from McDonald's, be marked tardy to class. We have no idea where you were. Just so you know. Some of the staff are hoping that that gets addressed. The other thing that caused a lot of not necessarily very polite words today, we don't know if you're aware of the issue of the servers for the computer system in the district. Maybe you are, because I know a lot of times at the weekend it's not possible to access either email or through the gateway to get in because the servers are down. Today, as on most days in the last 2 or 3 weeks at Innovation Central, today the servers went down at least 3 times. And again, we're on an hour block system. And what that means is we got kids who are working for, 50 minutes, and then they can't save their work. So it leads to a lot of unpleasantness because there's nothing we can do. If anyone's listening, if they want to donate, say, 1,000 flash drives, because I had 20 at the beginning of the year and I have none now, at least if you have a flash drive, you can plug it in and they can save their work on something. Right now we have nothing because they can't access their hard drive. And if they save to the computer that they're using, it gets wiped out when they log off the computer. So people would just like to know that you're aware of that, and I don't know if you are. We're trying to use computers a lot, and it's related to academic achievement because of the Common Core coming up. And we want to make sure that our students are proficient in using the computer, being able to manipulate things on the computer. So it's really important for us. Also, when they go to college, they need to know how to use the computer. So we're trying to incorporate it, but it's causing a lot of frustration for our students. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other, okay, you can change your hat there. Any other public comment? Okay. So now we will have instructional council update. Anybody else? Instructional. All right.
Is there anybody else in the room? You can all go.
Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Louise Wilson. I'm the chairman of the Instructional Council this year. And I have a report from the Instructional Council meeting of October 17th. And I want to be clear because several people asked me, where are your minutes? These are not the minutes of the meeting. The minutes of the meeting have not yet been approved by the council. They won't be approved, they won't be up for approval until next week. So these are merely chairman's notes, and they're for your information so that you have sort of a contemporary look at what's going on. So we did actually hold a meeting, which was a very useful meeting, actually. We voted to retract the voting quorum that was instituted for last year, because as you recall, last year we couldn't get very much done because we had to have a quorum of members present for each vote. So now we're just using whoever shows up, that is the quorum for voting. So voting in support of courses will continue to be recorded, and nay voters will also have their objections expressed in writing, which is where we were 2 years ago. So we're back to that. We also fixed the meeting dates for the rest of the school year. November 21st, which is next week, December 19th, January 30th, February 20th, March 20th, April 17th, and May 15th. These are all the third Thursdays, except for January 30th, which we moved because of secondary exams. The meeting time will continue to be 1 p.m. The meeting place next week will be the GREA boardroom at 3205 Eaglecrest in Grand Rapids. We did have the meeting last month down here in 4H, and there are issues associated with parking and having the building opened. We didn't make a decision on where we're going to meet for the whole year. We're just trying out different locations to see what we can find. We had 3 requests to examine courses, but we had to table them because of a lack of information, and nobody came to support the course and tell us what was going on. So we're expecting to have those come
These are
next week.
New courses?
These were new courses. Well, one of them said that it was merely a name change, but since we couldn't find what the old course was, we had no way of knowing that. The other 2 would be new courses. And we deferred until next week a decision on subcommittees, what subcommittees we wanted to run. We had a lot of discussion about the council's role. One of the things that we've asked is for people they run a pilot course and they take data, take information, and they come back and tell us how did it go, what needs to be changed, what was good, and they don't come back. We can't make anybody come back. We don't have any control over whether curriculum is implemented. There was a discussion about whether people came back even with a full curriculum, that there are courses running which just have the first 2 pages of basic description without any outline of what's in the course, which makes it quite difficult for teachers. But we're just an advisory body. We don't tell people what they run as the curriculum. There was particular discussion and a lot of concern from various people about Spanish courses which are running without curriculum. And we're told that the state requires that Spanish is available for students, but we're also told that the state requires us to have a curriculum. There was discussion about the potential for a course for Spanish speakers who might need to learn to read and write Spanish, but already have significant vocabulary. And there was a suggestion that the district looked at purchasing curriculum from nearby districts for those courses that lack curriculum. And Carolyn sent me then an email which said that there is precedent for doing that we bought it. Did you say last year, Carolyn?
Actually, the courses that you pulled up the Spanish curriculum while we were at the meeting because it was stated that we didn't have it and we did.
Right, and that was bought from someone, you said, I think, didn't you?
No, the teachers worked on that, but they actually, the textbooks that they purchased last year and the year before are primarily the driving force of that particular curriculum. And the detail was in the actual text after I looked at it more.
So, anyway, that was just a
So
suggestion
the new
that came up.
courses were these courses that you're
Pardon?
referring to? The new courses that you said that you needed more information about were these courses?
No, these are the new courses that we need more information about were completely different courses. The issue with courses in general, and particularly apparently foreign language courses, running without a full curriculum is apparently an ongoing issue. And there's particular concern apparently about the Spanish courses, that there isn't any curriculum, and I'm told by one person that we're running with something that is way out of date, and I'm told by somebody else, no, we have a new curriculum. So, but because it hasn't come through us, I have no way of knowing.
Carolyn, you want to address? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Glad to. And I appreciate Louise giving me this opportunity. This is really the first time to come.
Oh, no, I'm done.
Okay. So I don't know if Louise remembers, we start off with a framework of a curriculum, and it has been our role as curriculum supervisors and specialists over the past 2 years to redo that framework, giving teachers much more detail. If you see our most recent curriculum or syllabi, it begins with teacher notes. When we put them up on the curriculum drive, we try to have the assessments ready. They're much more detailed. So what used to be 3 pages is probably close to 80 pages now, because we try to give them sufficient information to run a course. Our Spanish courses, our language courses are the last ones for us to take on. And I didn't feel so badly about that because we've had teacher teams working on that. I don't think they're not up to the standard that we see in ELA, in math and social studies and science, but they also updated their textbook at about the same time. They started to purchase the newer version, and the newer version came out with more detail. I still think are some concerns around foreign language. I've been standing in the foreign language courses in classrooms quite a bit this year. I think there is some work to be done. I do like the materials that they selected. I sat with a teacher last week. We went over her assessment process. They use the assessment that comes along with the program, and they have writing rubrics, on and on. I think we just have to help teachers utilize those materials properly. And I'm not saying I'm not pointing at any particular teacher or anything like that, but even if you speak a foreign language, it does not mean that you also have the teaching experience that's necessary for helping kids to acquire a second language. And that's kind of what I'm seeing. I'm seeing an array of experiences in our district.
And there's a new, one of the things Louise was talking about was the Spanish for native Spanish speakers. And so is that a new?
No, that was something that actually we looked at under our last supervisor, but the materials that the teacher selected, they come with differentiated strategies in the teacher's edition, and a part of those strategies are strategies that are directed towards the support of native Spanish speakers.
Okay.
So they have, I think they're great materials. For as much as I know about foreign language, I still think we have a training initiative that's needed. And when we select a foreign language, I think we have to be very cognizant of what we know are sometimes shortages in personnel that can actually address that particular language effectively. And I would say Chinese is one that would concern me more so than Spanish. I actually stood in some of the Spanish classes. Some of them are going along very well when the curriculum is taught. Because even with the framework that we gave them around grammar and on and on and on, it's enough rigor there to keep them busy for a full year. But I think they need to adhere to that particular curriculum.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
The statement was made that you're operating with limited syllabuses for Spanish-speaking students. Is that
Actually, the
correct?
statement was made that we didn't have one, and I think Louise pulled it.
We pulled it up, didn't we?
on
I said it's
the
not that we don't
curriculum
have
drive.
one, yeah.
But it doesn't look like the ones that we've been working on since we've been doing our recent curriculum work. What we did as curriculum staff is we developed a prototype that is used across all of the content areas. And that prototype is far more detailed than what Louise is referencing. So over the past probably 3 to 5 years, we've been trying to actually clean up the curriculum guide. If there's no curriculum, we try to throw it out of the curriculum guide. We just been trying to tighten up the work of the district so that if a teacher walks into the classroom, there is sufficient information to proceed. Is it perfect? I'd be the first one to tell you, no, it is not perfect, but am I proud of the work that they've done? They have done a yeoman's job in improving the quality of the syllabi that we're putting out.
And I think that there was a concern that there are courses which just have that 2-page sort of general description. And part of the issue is with this variability, it's because there isn't a detailed syllabus to follow, really, isn't it?
Actually, I'm the person that brought it up last year.
I wasn't going to say that, Carolyn. I wasn't blaming somebody.
But no, she is correct. Teachers could very well use that as a framework, because generally what they're doing is using the textbook as their guide. But if I have an opportunity at a later date to share you probably some of the work that Roseanne has done, they go far beyond just what the textbook is offering. They would provide differentiated strategies, PSYOP strategies, on and on, all within that particular guide, so a teacher does not have to look around for a lot of resources. They support the syllabi with additional resources, with links to websites, on and on. And that is where we hope to end up with all of our syllabi. When I looked at the materials that the actual textbook came with, I was actually very satisfied. They had good common assessments, they had workbooks, on and on. Now I have been going to peer into classrooms and to also determine, do all of our teachers have all of the materials? Because I think if they're going to do a good job, they need all of that support and more until we get them all. So I hope that answered your question.
All of your teachers prepared to teach the Spanish class?
It wasn't, Spanish is not my biggest concern, although I know it came up. If I could answer that at a different time, I would like to do that.
In other words, there was somebody else who was more concerned about Spanish. She was much more concerned about a bunch of other things.
No, I had certain concerns around foreign language, but, and as I stated before, and the teachers would tell you this too, because I speak a second language, it does not mean I'm able to help you acquire a language. So with this new requirement by the state of 2 years of foreign language, and that is changing, the state is going to go back to one, there is a greater demand for teachers who can teach or help students acquire a second language. Some of the languages like Chinese, there is such a shortage of qualified teachers. We even contacted the Confucius Institute. We went through the ISDs, on. And we could bring teachers here. We had to pay for their housing. So it is more complex than it may appear. I give the teachers credit for their efforts. I don't want to sound like I'm here belittling their efforts, but as a curriculum director, certainly there are things that I'd like to do and change.
And I think that your talk was really more about supporting the teachers with more information rather than criticizing the teachers. So
And
we're working
I
on
won't
that.
do that.
Well, thanks. This is, it does sound like, one thing we should for sure conclude is that it would be a good job security for a young person to go into language instruction. So anyway, this is really, I don't know if we need to but what's really nice is to hear the communication and the discussion and to have some sense of how these conversations occur. And so I don't know if we need to ask for any more information in the future about Spanish or foreign
I did
language
bring
instruction.
materials if you do want to look at them.
I'm
but-
fine. It's just,
okay.
it sounds like you guys
We're moving along.
are having a very worthy conversation and moving things forward, so I don't think that we need to get in the way of that. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Sounds like the instructional council is doing good. All right, so, overview of the year 2 priority school process. Who's gonna introduce that?
Hi, I'm Leanne Lang. I am school reform facilitator for the elementary division. And it's actually the year 1 priority schools. When we were here last month, we were talking about the year 2, so that's just a small typo.
Okay,
So year 1 is a little bit different than year 2, and we'll talk about
okay,
that.
okay.
So we're doing year 1?
We are talking year 1, and then we also have one focus school that we need to address today as well, and they'll be presenting.
So we're gonna, you're gonna do the,
I'm going to do a very quick overview,
of the,
and then each of the schools that
Okay.
are on the agenda will be
Okay.
sharing some PowerPoints and
okay,
information.
and then are we gonna shift to this? Mo and I might wanna leave. Not leave.
Sure, which way?
And Can you see okay, Ms. Slade?
Find a way.
Okay. It's pretty brief. My PowerPoint's not gonna go on and on, so it's very short and sweet. So as you learned last month when Mel was talking to you, we talked a lot about the top to bottom ranking. So every August, MDE sends out a list of all the schools in the state of Michigan and the top to bottom ranking. So with our priority schools that we have today and our focus schools, and really every school in our district is part of this top to bottom ranking. So if you are a priority school, there are 3 metrics that are used to determine their priority school status: achievement, improvement in achievement, and then the gaps in achievement. But then for our high schools, graduation rates are considered. So if they have 60% or less in a 3-year period, then they become part of that priority school list. So here is that slide that Mel shared with you last month. I highlighted all the schools that will be presenting today to kind of show you what's going on. So you can see up in the top section, we have Union and Westwood. They're under priority school year 2 on this diagram because they were listed as priority schools last year. Since they were still under SIG, they had a sustainability component that they needed to complete last year, so they were not operating as a priority school. They were continuing under SIG. So this year, they will be operating as a priority, and they will have some requirements that they need to follow with that. So part of our year 1 this year is Dickinson, MLK, and Ottawa, and then our focus school that was identified as Coit, and I'll share a little bit more about these programs. So what is a priority school? We already said anyone that's identified in that top to bottom list, it's the 5% or lower. Generally, what it ends up being is 4% to 0%. Since there are some schools in the state of Michigan that do rank at a 0%, those are added, so it's 0 to 4%. Any school with the graduation rate of 60% or less within a 3-year period. And then as a priority school, we're gonna talk about this in a minute, some of the things they need to do, but they're really under a 4-year cycle. Thank you. The first year, which is the year they're in right now, is the planning phase, so they are working on creating some of their plans, and then for the next 3 years after that will be when they're implementing the plans that they create. So again, what does this mean if you're a priority school? Each of our priority schools needs to complete a reform redesign plan, and I'm going to talk to you on the next slide of what those 4 intervention models are, and I'll share with you what we have decided for the schools that have been identified. Each of the schools during this school year, again, they are working on creating their plans, and they will be implementing them through 2017, so through that school year. There are multiple requirements that each of these schools needs to address within their reform redesign plans that they will be monitoring, and then when they actually are in years 2, 3, and 4 of the priority school status, we have somebody from the school reform office, which is part of MDE, that will actually be coming into the buildings and doing some monitoring of what was in their plans and what they can see in their buildings with that being implemented. So here are the 4 reform models that we can choose from. I know we shared this with you last week. So the 4 are transformation, turnaround, restart, and closure. Closure and restart obviously are the easiest to understand. Transformation has the most requirements that you need to follow. There's 11 of them. 1 is replacing the principal if they do not meet the turnaround competencies. And I'll just share with you what those are. They're not on the slide. The 5 competencies are identify and focus on early wins and big payoffs, break organizational norms, act quickly in a fast cycle, collect and analyze data, and galvanize staff around big ideas. So they need to meet those 5 requirements for us to either determine that we're going to replace the principal that's currently there, or for us to say that we're going to have this particular principal in there, we have to believe that they can meet those 5 requirements. Part of their plan, they need to come up with an evaluation reward replacement components. A lot of that ties directly into the current teacher evaluation process. A lot of the information is provided right through HR that they just drop into their plans. It's nothing that they can really create on their own. Rewarding, though, they can determine some things that they can do in-house. Each of the schools kind of can be creative with that, but as far as the evaluation replacement, they follow whatever HR policies are in the district. They need to use data to inform PD and instruction, so they do some additional work in their buildings around specific strategies and activities that are part of their reform and redesign plans. Increased learning time has changed somewhat from the meaning that it used to be. So last year in March, they actually changed what that meant, where we used to, with our SIG schools, if you remember, we had to increase their school day by 15 minutes. Well, in March, they changed that ruling because it really is a financial burden on districts to do that. So what they have said, what increased learning time now means is restructuring the school day. So really looking at how much time is being wasted compared to how much time is being spent actually teaching. So looking at bathroom breaks. So if you're wasting 20 minutes on bathroom breaks, then we need to go in and figure out what we need to do differently so we're not wasting 20 minutes of instructional time. So it's really taking a very close look at your current structures in your building to determine ways to increase instructional time with students sitting in their seats in the classroom. Family engagement and then that operational flexibility are all part of those. The turnaround model is all the same things that I just said for the transformation, except this is the one where we have to replace 50% of the staff, which, if you recall last year, we addressed that with Union. So this is the plan for the 4 schools. Union is not up there because last year we chose the turnaround model for them. They're under SIG, so they were still finishing that. This year they're operating under the turnaround where they replaced 50% of their staff. So MLK, Dickinson, and Westwood will all be doing the transformation plan, and then Ottawa Hills is doing the turnaround. So again, that falls under that 50% of staff turnaround for the next school year. So they contain their staff that they have currently. Next year, they'll follow the same process that Union did. So I also told you we have one focus school, and that is Coit Elementary. And just to kind of briefly explain to you what we mean by focus, it's really still that top to bottom list, but what they do is they look at schools that have a very large gap between their top 30% of performance and their bottom 30% of performance students. And they're really using that MEP data to look at that. So schools that have the largest gap, the top 10% in the whole state of Michigan, are what's deemed focus schools. So it has nothing to do if you're in the bottom 5%. It has to do with the 10% of Michigan schools that have the largest gap in their student population with their achievement. Focus schools can also be priority schools. It's just a matter of how their data turns out. But luckily, Coit is just a focus school by itself. So we have some timelines for the priority schools. They have a little bit more work to do than the focus school. The plans for priority schools is a multi-page report because of those 11 requirements they need to respond to. The focus school has a 2-question report that they respond to, so it's a lot quicker for them to turn their product around. So on August 26, officially, all of the schools that were named as priority schools fall under the supervision of that school reform office. So really what that means is that we're now going to be monitored and we'll be working closely with MDE. We receive help with the KISD. They work with our priority schools, and then we also have someone from MSU who is working closely with us with our priority schools. And then again, the SRO officer will begin doing some monitoring in the buildings, potentially at the end of this year, but for sure next school year. On October 8th, all of our priority schools had their first draft of their reform redesign plans due to MDE. And 20 days later, we all drove down to Lansing where we received face-to-face feedback with the folks from MDE who actually read our plans to give us feedback on things that we needed to improve on, areas that we do not need to add anything, and then where we needed to add some more language. So all of our schools received that feedback on the 28th. Then we have right now we're working with the schools to fix all the things that MDE requested from us. And then on November 25th, we submit the drafts again to MDE for them to then hopefully make as the final draft. We hopefully won't have to make any more changes after that. Generally, because there is some things that needed to be agreed upon, they do give us a window in August, by August 1st, to submit any kind of letter of agreements that we work on a little bit later in the school year because you can never meet these deadlines with them. There is, sure, right ahead.
What kind of feedback do you get from MDE? Do you get real practical information?
It was extreme. This was what we received from MLK. So you can see it's a lengthy document, it's multi-pages. And really what they do is they have a rubric that all of the priority schools receive as they're working on it. So we really use the rubric as our framework for trying to respond to the questions that are within that reform redesign plan. And the feedback was very helpful, but the nice thing was that the teams were there, so you could ask questions for clarification as well. So last year, we received just the rubric, and so then we had to make phone calls to kind of get some clarification on things we weren't sure of, what they really meant with their comments. This way, we had a team from central office went down, as well as each of the school teams had some representation. So we got to really dialogue with them. They blocked a time for each of the schools to sit down. So it was very helpful. We were able to clarify a lot of things that we were not sure of. And then really, just being able to have the opportunity to ask the questions, I think really helped us the most, sitting around the table. But yes, it was very lengthy. I think every document was around 12 pages or longer with the feedback, but it was really, they responded to each of the requirements. And each of the requirements in some cases have multiple components, so they then respond on each of those separate components too. So it's a very lengthy feedback. Any other questions about anything I've mentioned?
I do have a question
Yep.
on the principals having to demonstrate turnaround competencies. For example, what is that? Do they
well-
demonstrate that on a test?
No, it's really from some of their prior behaviors as administrators, so things that we have already seen them doing. So again, those things are identifying and focus on early wins and big payoffs. So that right there would be looking at your data and saying, what are the things that if we focus on really intensely right now is really going to turn our achievement around? So being able to look at their data and really identify very specific things that their staff should focus on. So that would be one of the areas. Breaking organizational norms. So part of this is that flexibility, that operational flexibility. So they need to be able to make some decisions in their building that's going to move achievement. And, it's not something that they're just gonna go and do. It's a conversation that they have with us and their executive directors to say, this is what we feel we need to do, and they have to be able to justify it, but if, we have to give them the opportunity to do that. So it's really them taking a real hard look at what's in front of their face, all of their data, what they need to respond to first, that's going to make the biggest change in their building. Because really, they have 4 years to turn their program around to get off of this priority school status.
So you determine the competencies for the state?
The state, this is the state's competencies. And so when not me, when the cabinet really, that's their decision, which principles they're going to put into place. They know what these 5 competencies are. So when they're deciding who's going to be placed into these priority schools, they're looking at this to make that determination. Have these administrators shown in the past these kinds of skill sets so we can place them into a priority school to make some changes and gains? Whether we keep who's already there or replace it with someone else, it's really up to the cabinet, Mrs. Neal, to do that. Yeah? Any other questions? So this is a lot of information, and there's actually, what I gave you is very minimal. So in this PowerPoint, there are 2 websites, and Dana will forward this on to you guys when I forward this PowerPoint to her. There's so much information on these 2 websites about priority schools and focus schools, more than you could ever really need, but if you really want to look at the calculations, everything you would need is on these websites, and they're very helpful. So if you don't have any questions for me, I will actually turn it over to Dickinson, who's the next school team that's up.
Hello. I'm going to actually work backwards because some of the work that I planned on doing, Leanne did awesome. I am Stephanie Davis, the principal at Dickinson, pre-K-8. And I am going to tab down just so you can follow along. I am working off of another piece of paper. Okay? Okay. How was Dickinson determined a priority school? Using the data MEP map, obviously not DIBELS. That is some data that we looked at, and parent perception surveys to dictate why we used or why we are using PBIS as one of our big ideas. Over the past 5 years, student growth has steadily declined at Dickinson. Since 2008, it has gradually decreased each year. The MEP reading, which is one of our big ideas, the MEP reading for 3rd grade was 25% proficiency, or 25% of students proficient. 4th grade, 29.6% proficient. 5th grade, 32%. The MAP data is the lowest in the district. It is a negative 0.45. Grades 2 through 5, the LEP, so meeting target is 33%. The grades 2 through 5 school non-LEP is 28% meeting target. And DIBELS K2 is less than 15% of the kids actually making benchmark. So the vast majority of the students are well intensive in the areas of reading and fluency. Now I'm going to page back up. Are there any questions about that or no? Okay.
Yeah, this is,
So everything is kind of low. We are 3rd% from the bottom. Talking to the team, there were multiple areas that we could look at and attack, but actually through observation and looking at some of the data, the big 2 areas were PBIS and implementing and changing the climate and culture at Dickinson, so that we could create a positive climate and culture and a climate and culture that is conducive for learning to take place. And reading. So reading is huge because you have to be able to read in order to do anything. And so in order to improve the social studies, the science, or any other area, they need to be able to read. So our 2 big ideas is PBIS and flexible grouping. With the flexible grouping, we have already started that. Students, teachers broke into groups, smaller groups, so kindergarten is working together. First grade teachers and 2nd grade teachers are working together. 2nd and 3rd grade are working together. 4th and 5th grade are working together, and then we have a new middle school, and that's 6th through 8th, and they're working closely together. So they're using their 180 minutes to plan together, as well as I am using the 3rd Monday so that they can work in PLCs together and any other time that we deem necessary, so that they can look at the data and review the data, review the student work, which takes more time than just the 180 minutes and the 3rd Monday to do, so that they can provide flexible groups. So right now, if you came into Dickinson, you would see students moving from kindergarten to 1st grade, some to 2nd grade, some moving back from 2nd grade to kindergarten for probably 40 to 45 minutes during the ELA blocked time. We would have liked to do that with reading and math, but right now the reading is so low, we have to attack the reading first. How are we tracking that data? We are implementing data binders, which we are using to track the data. What is a data binder? A data binder is a binder that every teacher keeps, and it tracks all the teaching, the interventions, and every target. It also encompasses the pre and post assessment, so any given time you can go in and see where the student is, what their actual test score was for every assessment piece that they have. And in the data binder, you can record up to 3 interventions. At that time, if they need more than 3 interventions, then we need to look at some other things. That incorporates child study, it incorporates KSSN, and any other additional resources that they are privy to.
Can I ask a question? Are parents privy to this information as to the kids' reading?
Absolutely.
Are they participating with the teachers with the learning in reference to a child's binder as you have placed it?
Their data binder?
Yeah.
They don't have access to the data binder. The data binder is something that the teacher keeps so that they can track the data. Now, there are individual reports that they will get. So will they get a DIBELS report? Absolutely. Do they get MAP reports to show that information? Certainly. Parents are also invited to come to the PTCC meetings that we have monthly, as well as conferences, as well as child study meetings that we will have. So this data is shared at that time.
You also have really involved your community this year.
We work closely with Seeds of Promise and the Ed Committee, and we are bringing them aboard at a very fast rate. So we also work with the Kellogg's Foundation, which is the funding source behind it. We are also working closely with Grand Valley and bringing tutors in, and they work with the identified group of kids once a week. So how will we know the identified strategies of support is working? The strategies are written to support the student engagement, which will increase reading and proficiency building wide. So we are hoping and praying for an increase in the formative assessment, as well as the common assessment, the reading street assessment, the DIBEL monitoring, and the weekly goals, and the MAP. So we hope that all of this is moving us into a positive direction.
So it sounds like the major issue is the flexible groupings and then also the, really just the intense awareness of the data as kids move through.
It is, using the real-time data to make the changes in the instruction. So, that's huge for us. And moving students, we have, 30 in our classes. First, second, and third, we have over 30 students in all of those classes. And
That's a
they
lot of
are all
students.
very low.
So that's a lot of students.
So, without having smaller classes, we had to think the best way to move the work. So,
How is the attendance at tickets?
attendance is not bad. We don't have bad attendance. Any more questions?
So in the parent involvement, community involvement,
The parent
attendance, that's all on the right.
Yes, and parents are, with the PBIS, it's really changing the whole climate of the school. And when I say changing the climate of the school, my observation very early was, expectations were not clear of the parents or the students. So very early, the first couple of weeks, we had to, make it very clear to both parents and students what the protocols are, what doors we're using, volunteer badges, this is what this looks like. When you visit the building, you can't just walk in, you have to be buzzed in, you have to visit the office. You can fill out a volunteer application, so very basic, but we are still practicing that every day. So,
This smile says so
so,
much.
we worked also with, we worked with Seeds of Promise as well to say, these are what the expectations are. We really need you to be on board when you are working with the parents in the community, because they have several different pockets that they work with the parents. And so, we are asking them, we meet every 3 weeks to talk about what's happening at the school and then how they can support the school and how we can support them. So that's been working as well.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm Tricia Mathis, the principal at MLK, and I'm just going to scroll down to where I'm at. You have a handout in front of you? Do they have this
You
particular?
have it electronically.
Okay. So if you have any questions, interrupt me, just say, hold on, Tricia, stop, I got a question. All right?
Tricia now, Patricia.
No, it's just Tricia, yes. So the data used to determine the identification of MLK as a priority school by the state, MLK was ranked at the 2nd percentile compared to all schools across the state. Math achievement was at the 1st percentile. Math improvement is at the 12th percentile. So that has to do with the Z-scores that Leanne was talking about in the beginning. They look at the actual achievement. They look at the individual growth. So even if you have a student who's moving from like a 4 low to a 3 high, if they're making some kind of growth, that is also a percentage towards it. So that's why it talks about the improvement. And then the gap is at the 78th percentile. Reading achievement is at the 3rd percentile, reading improvement is at the 2nd percentile, reading gap is at the 58th percentile. So it talks about each of the growth in the individual gap. Reading is a main concern because, like Stephanie said, if you have an issue with reading, you have an issue across the board. Additionally, speaking to Tam, because Tam and I had a long conversation about this along with Steve, about where this is falling out and why is this happening. Not only do we not have enough students at proficiency, the growth is also not fast enough. So while we show growth, the growth is not fast enough, and we still don't have enough students at proficiency. So that was the data used by the state, obviously, to determine that we were a priority school. Additional data, though, to determine the priorities for teaching and learning at MLK was, besides the MEP data, were the item analysis of MEP data from 2009 to 2012. So we went back multiple years to look at the data, and it indicated that we had areas of concern were comprehension in reading and numbers and operations in math. And when you speak about comprehension, more likely than not, you're also speaking about fluency. And fluency, when you're talking about reading, has to do with whether or not a child can actually read
and then read and understand. So it has something to do with decoding as well. Numbers and operations in math, it's very similar with that same kind of idea. Do you understand numbers? Do you understand how the numbers work together and really the true meaning of, subtraction? It's not just I memorized it, but do you understand the concept of it? Data shows consistent but slow growth in frequent peaks and valleys in math and reading across grade levels in subjects. For the slow growth in the frequent peaks and valleys have to do a lot with the MEP data. The MAP data shows that we have consistent growth from when we first started till all the way to the end. But what you do need to understand is there is really a difference between the MAP test and the MEP test, if you've ever seen. They are testing at a different way, a different rate. So while MAP shows that we consistently grow, it also shows it very slow. So the growth is not fast enough, which is why this plan needs to move quickly. When you were talking about the competencies and the availability to look, let's move this in now. Recent MAP data shows that our lowest goal strands are foundational skills and comprehension, and then numbers and operations in math. Stephanie had a couple of pockets of information that they were going to use at Dickinson. We have a few more that we are using at MLK. MLK is already partnering with National Equity Project. Additionally, they're partnering with Partners in School Innovation, if you know anything about them. Partners in School Innovation is in 4 different schools in Grand Rapids, and NEP is in quite a few different schools, and NEP is the National Equity Project. So the big ideas that we have is using a data-driven model to guide all decision-making processes that directly link to student achievement in reading, fluency, foundational skills, comprehension, math, numbers, and operation. So the idea of teachers understanding that data book, like she was talking about, teachers knowing where the data is and knowing what the students need to know in order to be proficient before you even start that planning. Additionally, work with the National Equity Project to understand culture in class, its effects on students' learning, and best practices for students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. We do have a large population of African American students, and we do have a growing population of Hispanic students, but it is still relatively small. But the one thing that we do very much have in common at MLK is economically disadvantaged background. And so it's just understanding what that means, because it's been proven that there are things that come along with that, along with almost like an ELL student. There are sometimes language barriers, and it, even though they're not ELL. And so looking at the strategies that would best work with that through National Equity Project. For number 3, we have deepening understanding of academic rigor through professional development and learning communities, PLC, and then the implementation of the ROSI cycle. ROSI is the results-oriented cycle of inquiry that has to do with data again. Looking at your students' data every single week, using that data to determine your plans, and using that data to drive the instruction. Because if you're just following along that I need to teach this, but you're never stopping to look at where the kids really are or what you need them to know, that's going to create the gaps that we see right now. Any questions on that one?
Is the work with NEP new to the school this year, or?
Yes and no. It's deeper this year than it was last year. Last year was the first year that I started working with NEP, and they really kind of partnered with me more along the lines of they're partnering with the schools that are getting school Partners in School Innovation. And that was through a Kellogg grant. And so they're kind of partnering with us through that, but now this year they're very specifically partnering with us on the national equity. So it's deeper this year than it was last year. It was much more shallow, and it was towards the last 3 to 5 months of the school year.
And then Partners in School Innovation, is that associated with NEP?
They're not necessarily associated together, but they do often work together, from what I understand. A lot of times when you have a school that is with Partners in School Innovation, they're lower schools or schools that have priority, they're persistently low achieving schools. They come in and help put some things in place, not only with the leader who's there like myself, but also helping look at the processes in place that are actually holding the students back. Like Leanne talked about the idea of if you do a group bathroom break, do you realize it takes you 20 minutes to do a group bathroom break versus, you know what, we're coming in from recess, we're going directly to class. And so they often go hand in hand together. From what I understand, they've worked together frequently. But they're not the same entity. They are completely separate from one another. And if you want to know more about PSI or NEP, feel free to come see me, contact me, make a meeting, call me out, whatever, you know. I'd absolutely love to sit down and talk to you about it. This has to do with the feedback on the transformation plan. They just asked about specific feedback, so all I did was to just address those 11 pieces that she had talked about, and then you had asked earlier about what kind of feedback did you receive. So like number 1, when it talks about the principal competencies and building leadership, the only thing that I had to add to this was actually addressing the 5 competencies. Number 2, which is educator and administration evaluation system, it was stuff that we put on an attachment that they couldn't see, the people who read the plan. So all I need to do is copy and paste the attachment into the plan. Number 3, it just needed to be better defined, again, copying and pasting the attachment. Number 4, which was the qualities of professional learning program. That has to do with those 4 things that we are going to do with NEP, PSI, along with MLK. Has to do with that. There was no change needed. They said actually that it was really well written, so they told us it was a good job there. Recruit assignment, again, that comes directly from the district. All I needed to do for the processes was to add in specific timelines. For individual student data, I just need to put in the funding added, and that has to do with Title I funding. Time for core just needs to know how MLK is different from GRPS in the change in time allocations. So as an example, where other schools are doing staff meetings on first and third Monday, I now do all paper staff. It's an email staff meeting, it's a paper staff meeting in your box. That entire time is now used for PLCs, ROSI, understanding data, and professional development directly linked to this, along with the work in PSI and NEP. So I'm not having 3 different initiatives go on at one time. This is all work that we've meshed together. And then number 9, which has to do with the family and community, no change needed. They said it was a very well thought out plan on how to engage the family and community within this work, and also to make them very aware of the work and how they can continue to assist. And the last 2 are just needs a statement, no change needed. Monitoring the plan, learning walks, data dialogues, PLCs, which are 3 times a month. Observation and feedback by administrators, coaches, and peers. Classroom visits, evaluation, PLC agenda sign-in, PLC leaders bringing information back to the ILT, along with ILT meetings twice a month. Data to be collected in order to make sure that it's really going on, besides the top things of the monitoring plan, are the DIBELS, the map, the classroom assessments, and then the MEP to know whether or not it's making a difference.
So if you could summarize like a couple main things that are that's different this year, that's gonna make the change, what would that be?
The use of, honestly, the use of the PLC and the data, and teachers really understanding it. Data has been standing in Grand Rapids for a while, and it's been, originally it was used, 3 times a year. Now as a priority school, it's 4 times a year. But what we're doing is, instead of having these very prescriptive data reviews 4 times a year, we're having a much shorter cycle, where it's almost once a month, they're meeting to talk very specifically about reading data. The very next meeting, the second PLCs they're using to talk about their math data, and then the third they're using for academic rigor. So their data turnaround is at a shorter period of time. Additionally, truly understanding what the data means, just because I say to you that a child cannot decode, why can't they decode? So if they can't read because they can't decode, and you know that because you've given DIBELS, well, you need to give a deeper screener and understand even more data to make this student a learning partner within your classroom. Additionally, I would say addressing the strategies that I was talking about with NEP, and really making the student as a learning partner versus the I'm teaching and you're the student kind of thing. So really having the student buy into their own efficacy, and we've even seen that already within the first 6 weeks. There were multiple children who gave notes, little things, like a note to their teacher. I know I'm going to do well on the MEP because you made me believe I can do well on the MEP. But it's just having those conversations with students about where they are within their data, what it means as far as them as a reader, having them set a goal for themselves. What steps do they need to take as a learner? And so it's putting it on the student and the teacher together in a learning partnership. So two of the biggest things will be the ROSI cycle, the data, and then looking at how we can better incorporate the students into it.
Are the parents involved with any of that? Work with them?
Yes.
Where the kids are and help so they understand what they're learning and not learning?
Yes. When it comes to, like, we just held parent-teacher conferences. When it comes to parent-teacher conferences, there's 100% participation. However, at the same time, what you need to understand what 100% participation means, it could be a phone conference, it could be a written conference, it could be a school conference. So when you talk about school conference, I'm talking, 45, 50%. But in order for them to partake in some of the programs, because I have a lot of community support, in order for them to partake in some of the programs, they have to come to open house, they have to come to conference. I make it a requirement in order to receive, like, rewards from First United Methodist Church or different pieces like that. Additionally, we're really through B2B, trying now to get the parents in even more. And now we have muffins with mom twice a month and like donuts with dad, and we have seen it increase exponentially. I think last week for Donuts with Dad, when B2B comes in, and it's information that we are able to now give to them at that time when they're in there. I think we had close to 50 different mails in there for that time. So I had a conversation with them about how can we really use this time not only to bring the community information forward for them, but also make them very aware of where is their student or how can they engage and help their student.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Dr. Baker,
Yeah.
while Ada was coming, I'd just like to mention that, and I'd like to mark this, because I think this is something that our superintendent should be recognized for. She was very intentional in ensuring that we had coherence across the organization by setting up meetings with the various service providers even before they began working with the schools. And the purpose of those meetings was to ensure that we were all on the same page and that the service providers had adopted a similar theory of action for change before going into the buildings. Because what we've been doing is allowing the service providers to go into the buildings, and we perhaps presented a fragmented process and maybe even created some confusion at the building level. So we brought the service providers together first, and they worked together before they began to work with the building.
And by service, you're referring to NEP and?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, thanks.
Excuse me. Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Dr. Baker, Mrs. Slade, Pastor Moody. I am Rodney Lewis, building principal at Ottawa Hills High School. And I'm going to share, a little story about our priority school status with you this evening. But I kind of wanted to give a little prefix on how we got there and how we performed prior to this point. There was a couple. We're under our second or third different accountability structure as it look at from the state. Initially, we had AYP. We were able to make that a couple consecutive years and get off the Phase 5 list of lowest performing schools. We missed it 1 year after that, and then we came up with a top to bottom list. And from the top to bottom list, we were identified as being a school that was in the lowest 5% at that time initially when the initial numbers came out. From that, we after the final number came out for that year, we were at either 11 or 18%. And then the following year, we moved to 33 percentile. And then the following year, we were at 14. So we've shown growth. We had 2 years ago, we had a year where we came down from 33 to 14. And this past year, we went down to 1 percentile, which was very surprising to our school community. We have had some pretty good movement in prior years to that. But when you look at where the data is, this upcoming school year or this past school year, A lot of it was connected back to the Z-score. A lot of it was connected back, or having a negative Z-score, and was connected back to the achievement and the achievement and improvement of achievement. We were fine with the achievement gap. Actually, we were probably plus in the 83rd percentile in that area. So our kids are performing, but they're performing consistently. They're moving together. So our areas that we really have to focus in on is how do we move achievement overall and move that Z-score, and then how do we make those improvements or those gains. So that was one of the things that we had to address and look at for this upcoming year and look at for this priority school planning. It was identified earlier in this meeting that we would be a turnaround school using that model. And so some of the big ideas I wanted to share with you that we embedded within our plan for the Michigan Department of Education. One dealt with increasing the instructional planning time of our teaching staff and having them being able to use a lesson plan typically that was connected back to all the initiatives that we have within our facility to ensure that those initiatives are getting embedded within the organization when they go provide the instructional delivery every day. So we're looking at bi-monthly planning time for them to align themselves with the instruction and having coherent lessons that are connected back to the state and district standards. We're looking at having them do pre and post assessments on a weekly basis, connected back to our student response systems, which are better known for clickers, so they can get immediate feedback on how students are performing in the classroom, and so that they can modify their instructional practice immediately on the spot without having to wait and assess kids. So that was one of our big bullet points that we share with the state. The other one was the use of Teachscape's 360-degree cameras. This would allow teachers to be able to be reflective on their practice in the classrooms, where they can see exactly what's happening from an instructional perspective, see some of the deficiency areas that they may have, and see how they may improve their practice in the classroom. This also can be used within the professional learning communities as a departmental area where they can help support one another in areas such as, what the tasks look like, tasks and activities. How do the transitions look between tasks and activities? How was the questioning and discussion techniques put together in the classroom, whether they're effective, whether they're ineffective? And then what student engagement look like, and how are you formally assessing students within the classroom? And how did you close the lesson? What did it look like? Did you meet all your objectives and standards? And did you wrap it up at the end of the lesson so that kids understood exactly what they should have been learning? The last big idea that we had for the state that we shared with them was school-wide literacy. One of the areas we really wanted to hone in on was reading and writing, and how do we embed that within every classroom within the school. One of the things that we're doing is during our extended learning time, we're doing silent sustained reading for 15 minutes, where we're looking at kids are they're reading, but they're also doing quick writes, and they're doing pair shares to talk about what was the gist, what was the purpose, what was the main idea of their reading. One thing that we do know, going back up to the increased time spent reading, was the Michigan Merit Exam is a 3.5-hour reading test, and our kids get fatigued taking that test. And so we want to put in some practices that would support those kids getting a better stamina as they go through that 3.5-hour test. And so this 20-minute or 15 minutes of time during using sustained silent reading was one strategy that we use to support that. The other component is the quick writes. That's a strategy used to kind of summarize what you've read, what you've learned. One of the things that we really wanted to hone in on was the reading fluency, but also, by using that fluency and being able to decode and get through the material, can they really comprehend what they just read? And so that was one strategy that we used. We wanted to be able, for them, one, to be able to read it, two, be able to write it, and then three, to be able to talk about what they read to make their thinking visible.
I think your items of 20 minutes of increasing the reading scale and the 20 minutes a day is excellent. How do they do that? How well are they doing with that?
I'll tell you a couple different stories. One would be that the IMC, for the first time since I've been in the building, probably has about 666 less books in it than we've had in the past. I really haven't seen a lot of book checkout or sign out connected with our instructional media center since I've been in the facility in that way. But I've also seen 3 students in particular that are on their 3rd book. So kids are really reading and getting it going. So we're doing it in the, it is. It's a critical component of what needs to happen. And if you listen to any of the presentations before me, all of them are on the feeder system within the Ottawa Hills High School pattern, and everything has been connected back to reading. And so, you know, we are all focusing in on that that component.
So do you think that the 3.5 hours will work?
Well, the goal here is to increase their stamina for that 15, 20 minutes of time that we're engaging at in the classroom. We also have another component that we have academic strategies, which are directly connected to our 11th grade students that have to take the test in March. And so those students are given 20 minutes during their 3rd hour extended learning time, but they're also getting it within that academic strategies class. So they're reading beyond the 20 minutes, and also the instructor has them connected to reading at home as well. So with all 3 phases, we're hoping that makes a direct difference to what our results look like in once we take the test in March. We are going to take an assessment in January to kind of get a frame for where they are prior to moving into the test in March through our gains assessments. And so hopefully that'll give us some direct impact of what it's going to look like in March as well. So a little bit about what I just spoke about was gains testing. And so we have our academic strategies class, and academic strategies is connected back to how do we prepare students to be able to take a 3.5-hour test on day 1 that's supported by ACT, and we use our gains data that we just received back. We just had 2 professional developments or staff meetings that we used to extract the data and take a look at what deficiencies we have as a building to help support our implementation of our deficiency plan. So with that, each department head is going to submit a deficiency plan for their specific departments that are connected back to our gains data so that we can help improve instruction from a warm-up activities in the classroom, but also within those 11th grade classrooms so that they can support those students that have to take the test in March. I think this process is a 2-pronged approach. One, you have to be able to look at it from an instructional perspective, from day to day in the classroom, but you also have to be able to connect it back to these kids have to take this test in March. What are you specifically doing for those 11th grade students as a group? So the measures or data points that we use to determine the priorities that we have here, we looked at our MAP data, we looked at our MME data, which is our Michigan Merit exam data. We looked at our gains, EPASS data, which is the ACT Plan and Explore data, to help us formulate our strategies that we want to use to ensure that kids are moving in the right direction when they take the test in March. But we also have to make sure we're preparing those 9th and 10th graders in the system to be prepared for what they have to take within the next 24 months as well. Some of the data points that we have here, looking at 9, 10, 11th grade, if you look at the spring results from 12, 13, you look in the area of reading. If you look at the grade level that the results are from, they're producing at a 4th and 5th grade reading level. So, you know, we're already starting behind the 8 ball. They should be, 9th graders should be at the end of this spring, they should be at 223. Our 10th grade students should be at 225.4. And then our 11th graders will be fine because they don't have to take the MAP test this spring because they'll be moving into a 12th grade setting. So when we look at the math results for the MAP data, looking at, again, 4th and 5th grade, 9 through 11, and we're looking at, you know, a spring goal for the 9th graders of 234. They're currently, from last year's group, was at 210. So that 234 is the data that they, or the 237 at the end is the data or where they have to be this spring as 10th graders. So they have a big gap there if you look at across the board. Our 10th graders, 217.7, they have a spring goal this year as moving into their 11th grade year of 239. So again, we got big gaps. A lot of this, if you look at the reading and math scores in totality, they're both reading tests, right? So you have to be able to support reading across the board. This just gives you a 5-year snapshot of our ACT data. And I kind of highlighted the areas of the higher level areas of each area from a composite score of a 16 and 10, 11, where we're at 33 percentile within the top to bottom rankings, 14.9 for English, 16.1 and 09 for math, and then 16.3 and 9.10 for reading. And then last year we had our highest score in science. We were at 17.0. So that's kind of gives you a snapshot of where we were. If you look at the red at the bottom, that's the college readiness gaps that we have in comparison to 2012-13 to the actual benchmarks ACT has established. And these are the new benchmarks that were put forth this year. So there are some huge gaps there that we have to overcome. You know, you're looking at 3.4, but really when you look at growth and improvement on the ACT, they say 0.5 is a great margin for schools to, or jumps to make in achievement levels. So that's a huge margin that we have to overcome. Strategies, when we look at the content area literacy strategies, looking at 4 buckets here. We're looking at disciplinary literacy, continue to support that work. We're looking at thinking maps, how students organize their own thinking. We look at the close and critical reading strategies that we have in place, which is embedded within the academic plan, focus on critical information and how do you find it within that content. And then we're looking at the writing rubric and organizing our thinking in relationship to the performance of the writing expectations. Furthermore, identify strategies looking at student engagement, some of the things that we're looking at to engage students in the classroom. Again, we're looking at student response systems, interactive whiteboard. We're also having NOOCs. We should be rolling out NOOCs this second marking period, which again is going to be engaging within our reading initiative that we have within the building, and then the Teach Case 360-degree cameras. Differentiated instruction and academic rigor. You know, how are we giving kids options from an instructional perspective, whether it be assignments, whether it be assessment tests, and then how do we look to engage professional development and make it embedded within our practice? And then professional learning communities, how do other adults in the building support one another? And we've all thus far have talked about professional learning communities and how adults collaborate and gain support from one another to improve instructional practice. So how are we monitoring these things? We have instructional rounds. We have learning walks. We monitor weekly the grade book on a weekly basis. We have instructional conversations based on that with staff members. And then we look at how the formative assessment process is working, the pre and post weekly assessments that we have. And then monitoring of lesson plans, classroom observations, teacher evaluation process, professional learning community minutes to analyze those results and what's happening within those departments. Organizing or analyzing student work, as the work that students are doing, is it rigorous enough to get the outcomes that we're looking for, and then looking at the gains interim assessments, and then finally and ultimately is the spring MME data that would start the ranking process, the top to bottom ranking process for the upcoming school year. So next steps, November 25th, we have to have a final plan drafted for the MDE. We did have a session in October that we were able to talk with the MDE about our plans, our draft plans. One of the things, our plan was pretty solid. They did ask for some further clarifications on several areas. Nothing that had to be rescripted or redrafted, but things that just need to be clarified. Professional development is continue to embed professional development within our practice to ensure that, what teachers are getting, they're embedding it within their classrooms, and then continue use with instructional rounds, learning walks, and then professional learning communities. We are almost at the final stages of putting together our deficiency plan so that we can now start looking to support the kids with areas that they are struggling in as it relates to the ACT. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, the turnaround, so this is just the beginning.
Absolutely.
Then, obviously, since this is a 4-year plan, the kids that will be assessed on aren't at your school yet, right?
Well, the kids, well, it's.
I mean, the kids that you'll eventually be assessed on, 4 years from now.
Right, there's one group that's not in the system yet.
Right.
Yes,
So
they're eighth
hopefully-
grade.
So then that would require a relationship with the feeder schools.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Take a very quick break as Westwood is next.
He didn't even have to unplug, did he? I promise, Leanne, I won't take long. They won't let me talk. How long I get? I got 4 pages of stuff that I talked about. I'll keep it brief. I will keep it brief. I was waiting for Dr. Baker to come back.
Yes, right, okay, yeah,
Yes,
let's
Dr.
go ahead.
Baker. I'm Dr. Arthur Garner from Westwood, the principal. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to present our plan for priority school. As you see there in your PowerPoint, we have worked with Cambridge as part of the transformation project for the district, and that we kind of, one of the first things we had to target was that our staff needed to have a stronger understanding of what our vision and mission is for our school. And then we go on to, we've revised it about several times. We've had staff come in over the summer to look at data and look at our school improvement plan to make sure that we made some gains, but we didn't hit our targets that we would like to hit. And we started looking at our MAP data over the last 3 years. One of the things that was quite interesting is that once we got our MEEP data back, we had a lot of green, a lot of successes in our reading and mathematics, which we focused on the last 2 years as being a SIG school. But one of the things that we missed our target on was science and social studies. And so now that they're equally weighted in the MEEP, we did not focus on the things in the areas that we needed to focus on. So we started with our reading and math. Math is our largest challenge, and particularly with African American males and Hispanic males, that they don't do well in science and mathematics as well as we would like for them to be. So we started there as our targets over the last 3 years. The next thing, we started looking at our typical growth and seeing that we were making some gains, but again, we're still not hitting our targets where we'd like to be. We'd like those numbers to be up at 65, 70%, but we were still falling short. And that also translated into our results with our MEEP. Our MEEP gains are still around 8%, Even though we've shown gains over the last 3 years, prior to me getting there, we were around 2%, and we're now about 8%. So we're showing progression, but we're not meeting the state target. And then we also focused on, again, our typical reading, and it seems like a common theme from my predecessors who reported that reading is our issue, and that the foundation and that our staff discovered that in 8th grade, most of our 8th graders are at least 3 years. 74 out of the 130 that we have currently are at least 3 years behind in reading. And so trying to make those gains up before they go to high school has been our challenge over the last 3 years with all 3 grades. One of the positive things with that is that we developed a Read 40 club, and we have promoted this year Get Caught Reading. So students are now checking out books. There's some incentives that are tied into students reading 40 books this year, and at the end of it, it's a treasure for them. All the students who have increased their scores on the MAP and have done well on their MEEP and have read 40 books for the year are eligible for drawing for a Kindle. So we're an e-reader for the students. In reading, our target was really, we focused on fluency, comprehensive skills, and we've used the strategy of guided highlighted reading. But in our MEEP data, we found that informational text reading is still our struggle. Students still struggle with the vocabulary. We have incorporated in our school improvement plan using vocabulary, academic vocabulary, word walls and things like that throughout the school, not just a classroom initiative, but it's a building-wide strategy that we're using. Looking at transition words for students, going from grade to grade, and making sure that students have a clear understanding on how they're used in the content that they're being taught in. So that students, think a word in mathematics as expression. Students know expression as a facial expression, but not a mathematical term as expression. So we have to make sure that we're giving them an opportunity, and teachers are using the guided highlighted reading as an opportunity to ask students what does it mean to them, and so that they have a better understanding of that. And so those are the areas in reading that we focused on, and we think that that's going to translate into our science and social studies. For the last 2 years, we've used the math 5-day everyday protocol, which is also getting kids to do more word problems, which is going to enhance their vocabulary. Still using the guided highlighted reading even in math, and then with the benefits of SIG, we had an opportunity to buy more technology using iPads, Nooks, and more. We created a new computer lab, and we have more laptop carts where teachers at any given time during the day can have access to those technologies to integrate into instruction. Some feedback, as I mentioned before, is that we've had Cambridge work with us all the way up through September, and they've given us an opportunity to do a school quality review as we're going through the priority school guidelines, and being a SIG school carrying over the last year of SIG implementation. Teachers are making a stronger connection of how to understand the effective learning strategies. Now, we get trained on things, but a lot of times we don't always evaluate the effectiveness of what we've been trained on. So sometimes we want to make sure that teachers are connecting those, that what they're learning is having an impact on student learning, and not that it's just something that they've learned in their toolbox. We also wanted to make sure that our priorities as a learning community, we had started with SIG, and we're continuing through this process as a priority school, that we do more grade level conversations about groups of students and about where they are as relation to the bottom 30% and middle 40. That those students who are struggling, what are our strategies across the grade level, not just within the content, and what are the opportunities to help students develop learning, develop meaning in their own learning, and ensuring that they understand what's being taught. That it's not just because you're sitting with us 55 minutes and you did something for a common assessment, is that they're being able to apply what they're learning into their own lives, so that it has meaning for you. And really what we call it is creating value for the students. It's not just something that's being done to them, it's something that's being done with them and with their parents. Our staff is also conducting instructional research. In our last PD, we've taken every student in the building and put them on a chart, and we went through their MAP data, their MEEP data, and talked about what goals I've asked the teachers to have, and they're posted in everyone's classroom what those goals are for students, and we're going to review those every quarter. and that we're going to look at, we started something new this year, is that we're doing home visits by grade level. So when there's a student that a parent may not feel comfortable with what we're trying to get their student to do, our grade level is taking that opportunity to go as a team to meet with the parents on their own turf and be able to communicate with them the goals that we've set for the students, but also making sure that they understand that the school is an open door policy and we want to be able to communicate what we're trying to do for students. You heard Ottawa mention the Teachscape camera. We have Teachscape on iPads. So we have that 360, which is more of a wide screen, where teachers are using those after they do their professional development, being able to videotape themselves and bring it back to their content PLCs to be able to ask for assistance and look at other opportunities for professional development. Some of the key things that's come out of teachers using the Teachscape, we talked about questioning, about motivation and engaging students, understanding adolescent development, which is different from what it used to be than what it is today with social media impacting students' lives on a daily basis. So we have to be able to teach to the students and create that value with them by being able to understand who they are. And then also our data dialogue is happening, not just in content, but it's also happening in grade level. That we are talking about, again, groups of students to make sure that we're covering and not missing any student, and because we want all of them to be successful. Leave it at that. Questions?
How are the team visits, grade level team visits?
I think it's been an eye-opening experience for the teaching staff and us as an administration to support that, that when we no longer have an excuse to say that if they don't come to conferences, and a lot of times it's beyond the circumstances of the family, and that when we spend once a month discussing maybe kids who are struggling in school, it could be behaviorally for academic reasons, or it could be lack of reading, or it could be just a kid is not interested in school. And a lot of times, what I ask staff not to do is to assume that they know everything about a kid. It's the best way to know how to help a kid is allow their parent to tell you, and how to do that is to do the home visits. And they're happening more and more than what I've required for them to do once a month, so they're taking it upon themselves as a grade level team to go out and talk to the parents. And one of the benefits in our last PD that came out of doing home visits, now we're talking about doing PLCs with our feeder pattern into Westwood, so that it becomes more of a union family of schools, so that we're having conversations and getting information prior to kids arriving to Westwood, so that we can address some of those needs before they get there.
That's pretty impressive. It's, sounds challenging. When families are open to
Most of them are. And if they're not at home, they usually call us back to find out why we came by the house. So it's generating two-way conversation. It's not always a letter or a robocall. It's us actually going out, and if they're not there, leaving a note that we stopped by, and they usually, within 24 hours, call back and want to know why we were at their home, or what was there a problem. But it's really us outreaching to them to make sure that they're a part of the school. And I didn't mention it, but we're part of the Challenge Scholars, and that's one of the things that we want to do with Challenge Scholars is change the culture of the West Side so that we can outreach to them, and that it's an open door policy both ways.
Very good.
Yeah, great.
How's this gonna work?
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Carl Nelson, principal of Grand Rapids Union High School, and to my left is Mrs. Jessica Mott, assistant principal. I am proud to start off to say that Union High School is no longer on the bottom 5% in the top to bottom listing in the state. We have since celebrated that, and much like everything else, we have moved on and know that there is more work to do. And so we have, it's good to be able to come to you and talk a little bit about our next steps and what we have planned for Union High School. So what we want to talk about is our teaching and learning priorities. And the first thing is literacy. We know that, that literacy is one of the biggest components to our student growth and for their success. We also know that if we are able to have our students read, write, think, and speak during the course of the day, in fact, all 6 periods of the day, that they are going to have a good experience in their classrooms. We use that with our close and critical reading and our SIOP instructional strategies. We also will take a look at numeracy, and numeracy is the ability for our students to navigate numbers and problem solving, specifically with arithmetic and algebraic expressions. Our third is professional learning communities. We know that giving time to teachers and staff to be able to talk about those instructional strategies and talk about student-specific data is extremely important for their profession and to grow with our students. And then number 4 is an improved school climate. And one of the biggest things that I am a proponent of is making sure that our students they feel safe and that the climate of that school leads to their success. So along with our district-supported PBIS, we have also brought along Capturing Kids' Hearts, and we can talk about that in the next few slides. First is literacy. When we take a look at our MAP data from our feeder schools, our Common Core State standard targets for 9th and 10th grade, you can see that is in that margin of 1051 to 1355. And it's just reality. Reality says that on average, all students, and you can see the numbers right there, when students come into Union High School, that's where they fall as far as their MAP reading and Lexile scores. The LEP is the limited English proficiency, and SWD is students with disabilities. So what we need to be able to do is once they walk in our doors, is to get them ready on day 1 for that high stakes test. And one of the things that we really spend a lot of time with is close and critical reading. And that is our main strategy for literacy. We talk about guided highlighted reading. We talk about making student thinking visible. And then truly what we want to do is try to help the students understand what does that reading or that text mean to them so that they have a better understanding of what they're reading.
These numbers
Yeah, help me
seem
with this
differently than the way MAP data has been presented before. Can you explain what they are?
Those are the Lexile scores versus your actual RIT scores that you're going to receive with the MAP data. So you might see like a 209 or a 205. But what we can also get from the MAP is their Lexile score.
Right, okay.
And so by looking at their Lexile, and we use that because with Read 180, when we do the Scholastic Reading Inventory, that's what spits out for us as a Lexile score. So to place students, we use the MAP data for the Read 180. Based on that 0 to 30th percentile on their RIT score, but we're also looking at their Lexile, where they need to be in relation to the Common Core State standards.
So then what do these mean in terms of where they ought to be, or are they above, below?
This is the average of students from last year coming into Union High School on average, okay, from those schools. And pardon me? And what they should be is from the 1051 to the 1335 as far as being 9th or 10th grade ready. And what we will do is we will use Scholastic Read 180, which we purchased through SIG funds, and we will program our students into that course. And for those students who are consistent, they make considerable gains on their reading. And it's an outstanding program when you use it with fidelity and use it how it's supposed to be used. And we do. Again, it's just a fantastic program with our 9th grade students.
So then LEP are students who are limited English proficient.
Limited English
And
proficient.
their scores. And then SWD again was?
Is students with disabilities.
Never seen that in all my years of special ed. That's gotta be brand new.
They got
We haven't confused
a
you
new
with
acronym
special
for
ed.
Mo, you know.
We
so-
gotta add them.
More alphabet soup for you.
Okay, so,
Stay
okay,
up in the
all right.
field, you know?
Good?
So then it does seem at least that, there's a high number of limited English proficient students at Union, is that,
We will
be
take,
true?
we will take a look at that slide
Oh,
if
okay,
you,
good.
yep.
All right, thanks.
Or of those that you have.
And it's, okay.
Of those that we have
Right.
coming into our school, that is the average in which they
Okay.
come in.
Okay.
Of course, there are the outliers, right? But that is our average. We'll also take a look at, and in the next few slides, in the bottom right-hand corner, and I know you can't, it's a little blurry unless I need glasses. This is our MME data for reading from 2009 until 2013. We have been talking about and really need to put our emphasis on moving our students from that non-proficient 4 level to the right-hand side. I think that is obvious because we need to make sure that our kids are proficient, if not advanced, in their reading and in multiple categories of this Michigan Merit exam. You will also see when I bring up the following slides, you won't see a lot of trends. You won't see, everything it's stagnant. It hasn't moved anywhere. You won't see a lot of significant jumps anywhere. You'll just see that it's pretty much the same, maybe a few percentage points here and there over to partially proficient. But what we want to do is make that continual growth year in and year out and make sure that our students are where they need to be. So again, we use close and critical reading in our courses as far as the strategy is concerned. Here's where you will find our English language learner percentages. And when we talk about strategies, we really talk about our instructional framework of SIOP. And SIOP is one of those, is a framework, and I'm sure if you go to multiple districts, you'll find an instructional framework for just about anything. But we really think that Pearson has the SIOP instructional framework that is research-based. It has 8 different components, 30 features, and all of those really lend itself to good teaching. It gives us the ability for our staff to have the same vocabulary so that we're talking professionally when we have our PLCs. But as you can see, we have of 436 students who took the ELPA next year, which will change to the WIDA this year. Those are our percentages as far as our basic, low intermediate, higher intermediate, proficient and advanced proficient students who took the ELPA test last year. So Dr. Baker, I think that.
And what is that? Okay. Can you explain what that means?
Yes, so
Okay.
what they do is they take the ELPA test, meaning that at the beginning of the year, they let us know whether in their home speaks a different language.
Okay.
Multiple, and it doesn't have to be Spanish in particular, any language at all. And because of that, that first identified portion, we then put them into, we administer the ELPA test. And the ELPA test gives us an idea of where they fall as far as their English proficiency.
So then, for instance, 9th graders, so 20% are advanced proficient, 35% are proficient at English language.
Yeah, so in our 9th graders, 1% of our 436 students who took the ELPA test are in the basic category,
Okay.
which means that they need support, and probably a little more support than anybody else.
Okay.
And then as we go up, those students need less support because they have a better grasp of the English language.
Okay.
So out of the 436, as you can see, those with basic or low intermediate, we're talking about some pretty good numbers in our classrooms who have that, who have just that deficiency of the English language, and we need to support them as best as we possibly can.
Okay.
So with that, that's why we use our PSYOP strategies, and again, the non-linguistic representations. It just means that we need to be able to do more than just put the written word in front of them. We need to be able to have them visualize things, to be able to take their background and be able to use that for their learning. We need to be able to make learning real for them. Again, by thinking, speaking, reading, writing, we think that those are the strategies that we need to give to them in order to get a good grasp of not only the English language, but the content.
Of the students in November of this year, 436 took this test.
Correct.
How many of them do we have totally? Kids. How many kids do we have totally?
Total at Union is 1,050.
Okay, so 436 of these have a language issue.
Correct. Those are the,
They have more that are Hispanic or what other group?
yes, yes, but they did not take the test because it could be in their home that they speak English.
Okay.
Yeah. They may be of Hispanic descent, but
But they speak English.
yes,
So that's quite a lot.
Can I say something?
yes, ma'am.
Sure.
Jump into my seat. By the time you get to, excuse me, by the time a student is proficient or advanced proficient, and they are 50th percentile or more on the map, we exit them out. We keep them on the list for 2 years and we monitor them, but they're officially exited out of the ELL program. So those two last columns
Proficient
and advanced proficient we also look at their map and their MME, but those are the kids that are probably not needing any more language services. But PSYOP, if you are implementing PSYOP throughout the whole high school, that's also going to help those kids, even though they may not need the language services, it's going to help them become stronger learners. I just had to put in those two.
Thank you. That's good. That's good. Come on down anytime. And Dr. Gunnell and her staff have been very supportive in making sure that our students are supported with whatever strategies or interventions that they need. So I do have to thank Dr. Gunnell and her staff from the ELL department. Any other questions on? Okay. Science, as you can see on the data at the right-hand side, we struggle in science, in the science area. Science has a lot to do with data representation, being able to read charts and graphs, and we are targeting our interventions in our science classes with more of that type of work for our students, being able to read those charts and graphs, being able to decipher what they see, and that is a huge component, at least a strategy that we know of to help our students grow on the Michigan Merit Exam. In the social studies area, we are working, they are targeting reading, and what we want to make sure happens in our social studies department is that our students are able to take a piece of text and be able to locate information, be able to go through that piece of text and be able to find whatever it is they need to in order to make meaning and understanding of that text. So again, we're using all of our departments. This is not for any one department. No blame, no shame, no excuses. We need to make sure that everybody's on board with helping our students grow in understanding reading. Now, when we talk about numeracy, again, this is about understanding numbers, specifically arithmetic and algebraic expressions. Now, the cut score for being proficient is 237, and that is the average of where our students come in. This year, we did something a little bit different in which we, again, program students into either an algebra lab or into pre-algebra, something that we have not had in the district for a little while because of where our students were. We know that we have to take them where they're at and move them forward. Decision was made that we would institute pre-algebra and help out those students who were deficient in the math category and give them little additional support in that category. I am very, very proud to let you know that our staff are using the Texas Instrument Inspires. Those are tremendous tools for our kids and for our staff. This new calculator is able to do a variety of things that we never thought, and they can use it on their Michigan Merit exam. So they are using these calculators to its fullest to make sure that they are programming these in order to make it work in their to make it work on their Michigan Merit exam. It's just been a tremendous tool. They can also hook this up to their teachers' computers, and they are able to, it's much like a clicker system, where you're able to give them questions. They're able to load it up on their calculator, and then it'll send it right back to the computer. It's a great formative assessment for our students and for our teachers.
What is it called again?
TI Inspires. Texas Instrument. In fact, you can log on to their site, and I believe our guys last year who made the video, the algebra parody video, you'll be able to see that on there as well. It's nationally known now, I guess. I would be able to point you in the right direction of somebody who would be able to show you. Absolutely, I would.
Oh, no?
It'd be a math classroom.
Okay.
So again, those are the numbers. We know we have a challenge. We know we have obstacles, but that is not stopping us. We know that we have to program our students into the right classes to get them what they need in order to move forward. Also, and I talked about this a little bit, just the formative assessments with the TI Inspires just makes a tremendous tool for our staff and our students. In front of you now is some data from our tripod surveys. We have just finished administering the tripod survey for this year. This is from last year. We know that in the category of care and control, we have work to do. And that is why the decision was made that capturing kids' hearts was one of the things that I've always been interested in getting the staff involved in for two reasons. Number one, with the 50% coming in, I thought this was a tremendous effort to get everybody on the same page. Because even when you bring in a quarter new staff, it's sometimes difficult to get everybody consistent. But bringing in Capturing Kids' Hearts, and we had this professional development for 3 days in August, it did two things. Number one, helped our staff come together, knowing each other, learning about each other, and then also being on the same page with expectations and ways of addressing behaviors of our students. So again, I'm very interested to find out what our new tripod data will show. And I have to say, I got to throw this one out there too. Our PBIS team at Union is tremendous. It is staff members and it is students who come together, and they really do a nice job of promoting a positive behavior plan in our school. We do have some work to do, but I'll tell you, from the core, those students and staff just do a wonderful job of promoting the PBIS plan at Union High School. Monitoring plan, I'll leave this up to Jessica.
So our monitoring plan, what we use is instructional rounds. And instructional rounds is very similar to learning walks, but this is some of the information that we received through our participation with the Michigan Fellowship of Instructional Leaders with our work with Michigan State University. And so through instructional rounds, what we really look at doing is monitoring the professional development that we have put in place. So every 2 weeks, we go into our classrooms. In fact, we have some instructional rounds going on tomorrow. And what we do is we take 4 teachers, 1 from each content area to begin with, so math, science, social studies, and ELA. And as we go into those classrooms, we're specifically looking for close and critical reading, SIOP, and capturing kids' hearts, because this is where we've spent a bulk of our time with our professional development and our professional learning. So as we go through those classrooms, what we are really looking for is what is the teacher doing, what are the students doing? And we come together and debrief in the afternoon, and we just chart our observations. What did we see? We saw text being used in 4 out of 4 classrooms. We saw guided highlighted reading being used in 2 out of 4 classrooms. We really try to take the teachers out of it and really look at the classrooms and what is being done within those classrooms. As we go through and look at, what the teacher is doing, what the students are doing, we also start to look at what are some missed opportunities, where could there be some improvement made, maybe where is there some questions, maybe we didn't do a good enough job, and speaking about it is going to lead to deeper thinking in all content areas, and increase also reading fluency, and there's some interesting research out there by Douglas Reeves to support that. We need to explicitly describe our instructional rounds process. We have it in our head, and we know what we're doing, but apparently within the diagnostic itself, it was not fleshed out enough, so we need to be a little bit more explicit in describing that process. They had asked for us to articulate a building-wide process used to look at data. I think we are so used to just looking at data within our PLCs and within our staff meetings that it kind of becomes second nature to us. So to flesh that out a little bit further for them and to fully articulate what that's going to look like. One thing they had asked for us to do too is to create some implementation guides and also revisit our implementation guides. So what does close and critical reading look like in a classroom if it's being done well? What does SIOP look like in a classroom if it's being done well? What does capturing kids' hearts? And make that more explicit by creating those implementation guides with staff and revisiting that. And then we have the additional 15 minutes added right now with the school year, but for 2014-15 and 15-16, we will not have those additional 15 minutes added to the school day, but we still have to create a plan for extending that learning time. So as it was spoken about by some other schools, just looking at the school day itself and how can we maximize the school time throughout the day so that learning time is increased without actually adding more minutes to the day. Less wasted time.
Correct.
And then more next steps that we're looking at doing, within the near future is sharing this tripod student data with staff. We just got done administering the surveys. We will have teacher surveys in their hands. I believe the dates are December 9th through 11th, around that time. So being able to share the aggregate data with the staff as far as what we're looking like in the school. We do have 10 to 12 staff members that are going to be attending the Process Champions, which is another step within the Capturing Kids' Hearts, and those members will begin to be able to support other staff. So almost the Capturing Kids' Hearts coaches within the building, the leaders within the building to support other staff. So building that capacity. We're starting some literacy and action modules that's coming from the Mission Literacy website for close and critical reading. That's through Macomb ISD and MDE. And we're going to focus on our writing fluency, then onto vocabulary and comprehension. There's 6 modules altogether. And then continue our work in our ILT and developing our school-wide literacy plan, making sure that we have our specific departments and content areas owning certain work. Who is going to own this piece of work? What is it going to look like? Who is going to be the go-to person? How do we know that has been completed? What will that look like? And so being more explicit with that.
All right. Thanks. Very good.
Thank you.
Go right through it fast.
Now, we have till 7.
Oh, great. Well, my name is Barbara, and I just started at GRPS, and welcome at Point Creative Arts Academy. Thank you. So, let's talk about focus now. Barbara Reed. Thank you.
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt, but somebody get the alarm, is there a problem in here?
What, where's the alarm?
Underneath the board seats.
What was it?
Must be Mo.
Must be Mo.
It's no problem.
Oh, there's a button?
Yes, but how we set this out of here?
Okay.
Was it you?
There's like a little doorbell button here, I never knew.
Tony.
Who do they blame right away?
I was.
Must be Mo. What?
Sorry, Mo.
All right. Anyway, let's switch gears to focus. Now, before Ms. Lang was nice enough to explain what a focus school is, I'm just going to give a little more information here. Focus schools consist of the 10% of schools on the top to bottom list, with the largest achievement gaps between its top 30 and its bottom 30. So it's basically the gap, okay? And you can have excellent scores and still be a focus school. You can have, you be on a priority list and still be a focus school. We are not on a priority list, but we do have that gap. So let's look at that. Okay, it's a little hard to see. It's clear on my computer. What are the school's priorities? So if we're looking at the Z-scores, the state highlights in pink or red the areas that were negative, and that negative point, or 1.6447, translates to 5%. So basically, Coit did worse than 95% of the school districts as far as achievement gap in math. So we have some very high kids in math. Our proficiency levels are low. We actually are 10% better than we were 2 years ago, but our gap is larger. So what we need to do is figure out how to bring those lower students up in the bottom 30% without keeping the top 30% from growing. We always want to see growth. We want to make sure we accelerate learning, whether they're in the top or the bottom 30%, but making sure that that bottom 30% reach proficiency level on the MEP is what we need to do. So if we look at how we're going to approach this, the school improvement team, we all met to discuss overall gap subjects using MEP reports. Teachers met during their PLC time. When I came 2.5 months ago, we were not meeting for PLC time as often. I was told, so what we did was we made sure we had that guaranteed time on our schedule, and we looked at MEP data to determine gap subgroups and to do an item analysis. So basically looking at the MEP data, determining which items students were struggling with, and making sure we incorporate those items into our curriculum. Teachers shared results at the next PD. We had a PD on Monday, last Monday, and it was 3 hours long, and we shared out our focus data that we discussed at our PLC times. It was determined that the largest gap subject area was in math. The most prominent subgroup variation was females and males, even though the subgroups aren't necessarily taken into consideration with the gap score. We want to make sure that we hit those students strong in the area of math, females, because they were basically making up the majority of the bottom 30% compared to males. So how are we going to do that? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we will know that the plan is making a difference and how, in what ways we will track improvement. NWA map, MEP results. You know, this was the last year. We have a 1.5 year cycle now where we're going to have to look at not only this data that we will receive based on our fall results. Now remember, our fall results will be based on last year's instruction. So we need to use our map in between and our DIBELS and IXL, which is a program that I purchased for this school. It's basically aligned to our Common Core standards, and it pulls out different areas within math that we can work on to bring up not only MAP scores, but our MEP scores. Using district assessments, formative assessments in the classroom, making sure that teachers what is a formative assessment versus a summative assessment, and math competition results. So one thing that I noticed is that our staff is excellent at using the PBIS to guide their instruction based on behavior. But as far as academic performance, making sure that that students are meeting academic standards and rewarding those students for making benchmarks is something that we need to improve upon. So we have math competitions, one being, of course, the MAP, just making your growth goal as being a competition, and celebrating in winter if they meet their MAP growth goals, and things like extra recess time, 15 minutes, or bounce house or something like that on a special day that we can celebrate growth. But we want to always make sure that we connect it to an academic, rigorous curriculum. So one other thing that we've decided to do is our bulletin boards will be more academically based. We are an arts school, and we need to incorporate both the arts and math reading, this being math as our focus area, within our arts. So our bulletin boards will not only display beautiful pieces of works of art, but we'll also have our math competitions on our bulletin boards. So with that being said, what is the school doing now while we're waiting for the plan approval by the state? Our plan is to be approved in December, I believe. It is due by November 25th to the district by the 22nd. So we have had a staff focus meeting. We discussed overall PLC concentration of focus, received focus data, item analysis instructions for grade level PLCs, then academic achievement boards displaying math competition, currently basic computation. So do they know their facts? So that's where we'll start, and then we'll apply the knowledge in further exercises. November PD, discuss item analysis results, and then we're going to have a math night. November 21st is one of our Title I nights. So basically, linking academics to fun, making sure that students know that you can be learning and have a good time at the same time. So calendarizing objectives, Common Core planning. This one thing that we worked on during our PD is looking at units, looking at the Grand Rapids curriculum and extending it, making sure that we are incorporating map-type questions and concepts, and also MEAT-type questions and concepts within the curriculum, looking at how we can apply using not only the curriculum that we have that's offered in the building, textbooks, but also other things like IXL and teacher-created materials. So then we extended IXL training in late November. We're going to have extensive training so that teachers know how to use it properly. And fifth grade girls, are attending STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math conferences. That's something that the fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Smith, has taken on this year. And I'll learn more about that as it progresses, the outcome of that. Teaching learning opportunities to decrease the learning gap but increase student achievement. Touch math is something that we used to use that worked for our students, and we're going to make sure that we reincorporate that into the curriculum. IXL, math centers, hands-on activities, industrial design project with Kendall. We are an art school, so I have this wonderful creative arts specialist named Dave Dublas. And Dave, his task is to incorporate academics and the arts, making sure that he hits the Common Core standards. Actually, today he was at a Common Core training, so learning how to apply. And we also are linking up with Kendall to create a fifth grade project on industrial design, making sure that we incorporate our math focus concepts within the project and hitting our Common Core standards for fifth grade. So arts integration of Common Core curriculum, visual models. When we have the increasing we're increasingly using models and hands-on activities and group work because the Common Core model is to do so. We want to make sure that kids not only know their math facts, and we have to get those down, but they can apply that knowledge. So for the Smarter Balance assessment, students are familiar with the application of the curriculum standards. Increased knowledge of factor pairs, that's something that we found that we were lacking on the NEEP analysis. Quality questioning, that is something that we're going to do during our learning walk, is focus on quality questioning. What type of questions are being asked? Are they just asked to regurgitate information? Are they using higher order skills? Are teachers probing? And then, of course, the STEM Girls Conference. Okay. One thing I do want to note that I didn't include in these slides, we were a beating the odds school. We were a reward school last year. And that data, remember, is a 2-year data. So in 2010, 11, and 2011, 12, we were reward school. 11, 12, 12, 13, those 2 years created our focus. So our gap went from the 37th to the 5th percentile. So previously we were 63%, Coit did worse than 63% of the state as far as gap. And then we went to 95%, and that's based on last fall's data. So we have some growth to accomplish for those lower students, and still trying to keep the upper, the kids in the top 30% growing. Those students that are in the bottom 30% are not students necessarily with disabilities. That's like a misnomer that those students must be ELL or they're special ed, or students with disabilities. They only encompass a third of those students. So these students are students that are falling between the cracks that we need to make sure that we're working with. We have some great resources in our building, and we have KSSN, which is housed in our building. So we're working with that bottom 30%, tutoring with grandparents and tutoring with Kids Hope programs. So that's what I wanted to add to that slide. Any questions?
Sounds great, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to go.
Yeah, but it's switching a little bit now, isn't it? Or-
So I was kind of disappointed. It was like, I thought we already fixed that.
It wasn't significant, but it was there, so.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we could call it a wrap.
I think so.
Thanks so much, Ken.
That was
It's
a
a lot
lot
of work, everybody that stuck around.
Information.
Thanks, Ken, yeah. Thanks, Ken, yeah.